Hi, my name is Diane Bada. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about emotionally immature parents, what they look like, the impact they can have on you, and some strategies for dealing with them. This is a topic that comes up a lot. I've worked with a lot of clients who have had parents who were this way, and understandably suffered because of it. So I wanted to create something that would go into a bit more detail, just because it is such a common thing, unfortunately. If you grow up with emotionally immature parents, it can really have an impact on how you see the world, how you see yourself, how you see other people. Generally, when we talk about emotional immaturity in adults, this relates to having problems handling one's emotions, acknowledging one's feelings, responding in a way that is mature or would be age appropriate. When children grow up with parents who are emotionally immature, they can often feel neglected, they can feel really confused, and they can have a poor self-image as a result. So that's a general overview, but let's go into a little bit more detail, specifically on what exactly are emotionally immature parents. So to kind of summarize, emotionally immature parents are those who really can't regulate their emotions properly. They don't particularly have good insight into their emotions, and they may not respond to the needs of their children in a way that would be appropriate. They can struggle with being able to fully empathize with their children. You may also see behaviors like being very impulsive, being irresponsible, being quite selfish, being emotionally volatile. These are the parents who might forget to pick their kids up from school. These are the parents who might decide on a whim to move to another state without thinking about how this will impact their kids' education. Of course, behaviors like that can be related to drug use, addictions, etc. But in general, you're going to see a pattern of somebody who is not really managing their emotions or their impulses in an age-appropriate way. What specific behaviors might we see? So see things like childlike behaviors, being very defensive, throwing tantrums almost, not taking accountability, essentially behaviors that you would typically see in a teenager or a child. You're also going to see self-centeredness. An emotionally immature parent is really going to prioritize their wants and needs over the needs of their child, which of course, the vast majority of parents is not how things are supposed to go. You're going to see a lack of emotional regulation. So they will often have very kind of dramatic or extreme responses to things. If they're very stressed, they may be screaming. If they're sad, they may be crying uncontrollably, inconsolably, or they may totally shut down and go silent. One example would be somebody who really refuses to respond for hours, or they are kind of wailing and crying at the top of their lungs. Just something that seems emotionally dysregulated would be kind of a tell for some emotional immaturity. You could also see inconsistency. So not really following through with enforcing certain rules. This can make them seem very unpredictable. Children really, really need predictability. And if a parent is unpredictable, this can cause a whole lot of confusion for a kid. You can also tend to see some blaming, deflecting, responsibility. An emotionally immature parent might blame their children for things that really they are responsible for, which again, can be really confusing for a kid, can lead to a lot of difficulties for them in terms of understanding, what the reality of the situation is, or, why they end up being blamed for things that clearly their parents did. As mentioned before, also struggling with empathy can be something that comes up with parents who are more emotionally immature. This can obviously leave a child feeling very unsupported, feeling quite invisible. If you're a 10-year-old kid, you're going through a really hard time, and you try to get validation of that from your parent, and they're kind of like, I don't really understand why you're feeling this way. You can then learn to not really share anything again. You could also start to question whether or not your response was correct or accurate. So those are some things that you can see accordingly. And related to that, okay, what is the impact that growing up with an emotionally immature parent will have on a child, and accordingly into adulthood? There can be a tremendous impact, especially when it comes to emotional development, self-image, the ability to have healthy relationships later on in life. Unless somebody who grows up in this dynamic works with a therapist or has other adults who kind of model different behaviors, they may end up repeating some of the same behaviors that were modeled by the emotionally immature parent. One thing that you can see is a lot of emotional confusion. So if a parent was very unpredictable, if a parent modeled very extreme reactions to things, a child may realize, okay, I don't want to respond in that same way, but they then might not be sure of what to do with their feelings since they didn't have a model for how to maybe process or express them in a way that was less extreme. So sometimes this can lead to adult children, suppressing certain emotions, maybe suppressing anger, suppressing sadness, denying certain emotions just because when they did see them expressed, it was done in a way that was really, really volatile or extreme. Kind of as mentioned before, you can see, feelings of invalidation. So if a child made themselves vulnerable to their parent and the parent was like, I don't know why you feel this way, or you shouldn't feel this way, or, I'm busy, please don't tell me about this. This can understandably lead to somebody feeling very unseen, very unheard. This can teach a child that it's not really okay to seek support, or again, that some feelings are just unacceptable or that they're shameful. Not surprisingly, this can also be related to low self-esteem, feeling unimportant, feeling unworthy, questioning whether or not you provide value. I would say poor self-image is something that is extremely, extremely common among individuals who grow up with parents who are quite immature. You may also see difficulty with boundaries. So many times emotionally immature parents might not respect the boundaries of others. This could relate to time boundaries when it comes to asking for support. An emotionally immature parent may expect somebody to kind of be at their beck and call at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday night, which most people would know is not going to be the case. As a result of this, a child who grows up with a parent like this can struggle to know what proper boundaries look like. And because more often than not, maybe these parents asked their kids for certain things that may not have been appropriate, they may struggle with saying no or with enforcing correct boundaries when they're older. Because emotionally immature parents can be quite inconsistent, children who grow up in this dynamic may also have a difficult time trusting other people. If these were the parents who said, yeah, I'll pick you up from school, and then didn't show up in adulthood, children who grew up in this dynamic may come to expect the same. They may kind of, even on a level that's not fully conscious, just expect other people really not to follow through with commitments, expect people to drop the ball, unless they, intentionally choose to work on that way of seeing things, or they've had other corrective experiences with adults who are more responsible. Not surprisingly, also, you can tend to see a good amount of anxiety, depression as a result of growing up with a parent like this. That is kind of self-explanatory. Okay, so let's say you grew up with parents like this, or maybe you are still in that dynamic, maybe you're a teenager. What are some ways to deal with parents who exhibit behavior like this? The first is going to relate to trying to set boundaries. So again, as we discussed, the parent might not respect the boundary, but the least that you can do is to try to establish them. Boundaries are super, super important for people who are emotionally immature. They're super, super important in general. Boundaries are your way of kind of honoring your own needs and letting other people know what is and is not okay. You can, for instance, identify, what things are just not cool. If you have a parent who, will curse you out, call you names, will use a ton of guilt to try to manipulate you, you can call it out directly and say, hey, I know what you're doing. I'm not going to tolerate this. I'm not going to engage with you while you're engaging in this behavior. And you can choose to walk away from the conversation and let them know you're not going to return to discussing things until that behavior stops. Clear communication, being direct, is also very important and also very much part of the process of setting healthy boundaries. So being very assertive when stating what you want and what you need. A good example of this would be if somebody is kind of having a tantrum, letting them know, hey, I see you're upset, but I can't have a conversation like this when you're in this state. We can talk about this again when we're both calm. Another thing that is very important when it comes to boundaries and setting them is consistency. So many times people are not necessarily going to respect your boundaries right away, especially if you're talking about a parent who is a little bit emotionally immature, returning to what you stated, repeating it over and over again, that is one of the most important things when it comes to making sure that boundaries are respected. You just have to kind of follow up over and over again. You can try to practice being emotionally detached. So kind of separating the behavior from who they are as a person. Many times people will personalize actions or behaviors, meaning that if somebody does something, they can assume that it says something about them, that, oh, this person is behaving this way towards me because I am X, Y, or Z. This is so rarely the case, and reminding yourself that if they are having a temper tantrum, if they're yelling at you, it's not a reflection of you. It's not a reflection of your worth. It is just something that indicates that this person really can't regulate their emotions well. Accordingly, you can remind yourself that it's not your job to fix them or to change them. That is a pattern that so many people get drawn into, and it just doesn't work. People don't change because other people want them to change. People change because they realize it's something they have to do themselves. Having a good support system, this can include friends, romantic partners, a therapist, people who will respond in a way that is empathetic, that is understanding, can be extremely healing and necessary, especially if you grew up not really getting that. You can also, manage your expectations, reminding yourself that this person is a flawed human being, as we all are, that they have limitations, that they're not going to transform overnight into somebody who is wildly empathetic and responds in the way that you want them to respond. That's just not realistic. If you can remind yourself of that, it can be easier to tolerate because you're not expecting them to respond in the way that most people might respond, or in the way that would be most ideal. Focus on yourself, on your own growth, knowing when to maybe take a step back. If a parent, for instance, is in a particular period of time where they're going through their lot and it seems that they are engaging with you in a way that is very unstable and there's really no sight in the end, you can let them know, hey, I want you in my life, but it seems like this is not the right time. Maybe let's take a few weeks off from talking. That can be another option, especially if emotions are high or there's kind of a period of very high intensity. Outside interests, other sources of support, hobbies, things that can provide you with a way to kind of self-soothe and ground yourself and self-regulate that don't involve other people can also be quite helpful, because sometimes when you're feeling distressed, other people might not always be available. And that's just, kind of a general tip that's, I think, helpful for pretty much any situation. Overall, dealing with a parent who is quite emotionally immature is not easy. It can be really frustrating and requires a lot of strength, a lot of consistency, a lot of resilience, and strong boundaries. I think one of the most helpful things is to recognize that their behavior is not about you. So many times people get stuck in that line of thinking and it just makes things worse. Okay, I think I covered most of it. I hope that this video was helpful. Again, this is something that I see coming up so often. So I wanted to create this because it is something that people tend to look for information on. If you enjoyed this, please like, comment, subscribe. If there's a topic that you want to see a video on, also please feel free to write that in the comments. I'd love to see it. And yeah, I'm posting a new video around once a week on average. So stay tuned for more, and take care.